Q, we are on. I always like to say Q when he says Q, just so you know we're being cued. Stacy and Brian have come back. Brian, against his will, is back, but no, he's back. Let's move the topic.
You keep paying me.
Yeah, that's humorous in its own right. Football, that sport they play in September and October, November, and occasionally in January in Dallas. This is, and we obviously, Chris talked about the ticketing end of this, but there's been a lot going on. We're trying to put a magazine out next week as well, one of our glossies, and talking to assistant coaches and all those kinds of good things. And you've had some discussions with some of the new staff. Impressions early on, John Shoup being one, and Jafar Williams. An interesting group already.
Yeah, we throughout this week on the site we've been putting up a different story each day. We just had Kyle just did something on Hudson today. So yeah, I spoke with John Shoup and Jafar Williams and Kevin Sherman this week, and Shoup obviously is the guy everybody wants to talk about. Yeah. Because he's the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach, and I was able to speak with him for about 15 minutes or so, and seems like a really cool guy, kind of laid back, and I don't know, all these Bears haters, we'll see, Yeah. He was a great interview, so people who were saying he was a bad interview, I don't know how maybe it's the Chicago market. I think he likes me a little better than those Chicago guys maybe. But just in terms of the offense, obviously he said we're going to do what our quarterback does best. We just got to figure out who our quarterback is. So that's obviously the huge question going into spring practice, which starts in about a month.
Yeah.
Yep, Monday is the 18th.
Monday,
so yeah. So about a month from now, and they're going to do a progression read kind of passing offense, like we had talked about before, similar to the West Coast. You throw it to the first guy if he's open. If he's not, throw it to the next guy, then throw it to the next guy. So, but he wants to be obviously a very physical run team as well, and that's I think where it's going to start from. And that way you can do play action passes off of the run game. And everything he's saying sounds right. It's just a matter of whether they have the personnel to execute it and do what he wants to do, because the quarterback is, obviously going to be new, but the offensive line has to block for the quarterback, and they have to block for the running game, and, so you still need to find those pieces.
Now, Brian, you've seen staffs come and go, and you've seen successful staffs and some of the not as successful. And I'm just using as a point of reference Joe Tiller's first staff. Many guys kind of all on the same page coming in. Was extremely high-functioning staff, certainly based on the results on the field and their personalities. This is a different group because there are many that are coming from different places and have to not only learn to get along but learn to thrive in this environment. What are some of the challenges you see with that? Even though this is a group with a fairly good resume.
Well, first of all, thank you for not asking me if the Purdue football coaching staff was a fruit. What kind of fruit would it be? No, going back to the coaching staff, I think what jumps out is you see guys with a lot of diversity of experience, diversity of characteristics. You see a pretty good blend, it looks like, of kind of the wisdom of experience and the youthful enthusiasm of youth. I think you see some guys who came from Kent State who are still relatively young in the business, who have personalities, who have energy. But you also see guys who've done everything in this profession, guys who've won championships, played for championships, coached at all sorts of different levels. It's going to be a lot different. Kind of the standard for successful coaching staffs at Purdue football is that 97 staff you talked about. Tiller was able to bring that staff mostly intact. They had great chemistry. They had a lot of guys who were relatively young in the business who were kind of up-and-comers. They all worked incredibly well together. This staff has some connections kind of holding it together as a common bond. But really, as a unit, this group hasn't worked together as a whole. Some guys have worked with Darrell Hazell, some guys haven't. So it's going to be interesting, important. I'm not saying you worry about their chemistry. I'm saying it'll be interesting to see if all these guys are on the same page, because you have a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different guys who've coached at a lot of different places, a lot of different demographics in terms of their ages, experience levels, and whatnot. So it's certainly an accomplished group, a group with a lot of personalities, a group with a lot of professionalism. So it looks to me like he's put together a pretty decent staff. It's a matter of how quickly they can hit the ground running.
And we still have one more slot to go. Stacy, I thought that the one thing in National Signing Day and just watching the dynamics of these guys getting up, there was a very different type of press conference. And the fact that Darrell Hazell really had his assistants speak for not only the class, but you got a chance to see their personalities. Knowing what you know about Darrell Hazell and just watching him in the short time that we've been around him, which isn't a long time, your impression of how he will manage. You know, he's the coach of coaches, as they say. But how do you think he manages his staff?
And speaking with the different assistant coaches, all of them speak so highly of Daryl and I think they respect him. There's an immediate respect there. So that's huge, obviously, for your head coach and your boss. You need to be able to respect him. So I don't think there's any question that I mean, that's not going to be an issue at all. And you know, Daryl, when he was on the show last week, you know, talked about kind of getting them together on the same page in terms of practices and understanding how that's kind of go together. But I think in speaking with these assistant coaches, they all have this kind of common theme that they want to be a mentor, and Daryl talked about that time and time again. And so I think that he brought in some similar personalities to himself in terms of what he really values, and all of these guys seem to value those same kind of things. So I think just generally, if you kind of have that common bond to start with, and morals and what you value and what's important to you, that's going to be a good place to start.
A common theme, though, Brian, also I think Daryl Hazel made in his first press conference December 5th, as I recall, and Stacy's kind of touched on this, trying to mold your team to the talent you have, but that's a heck of a challenge when you have really little to no idea what talents you have sitting here on February 15th. I mean, they're just starting to figure out what they have.
Yeah, that's pretty common. Obviously, anytime a new coaching staff comes in, they have to adjust to what they inherit from the previous coaching staff. Obviously, now that recruiting for 2013 is over, you start on 2014 recruiting, obviously, you go all in on that. But what this coaching staff really has to do these next couple of weeks is get an understanding of what exactly they have. They have to evaluate their personnel. I know a couple of the coaches have watched all the games from last year, but now that off-season workouts are starting to begin a little bit, they're going to start actually getting to work with guys and understanding exactly what they have. From a systematic standpoint, you obviously have to craft your system around what you have.
Right.
You have to play to your players' strengths. We talk about that in basketball all the time this year. Is so-and-so playing to his strengths? Well, in football, it's really obviously important to craft your strategies around what your players can do best, probably no more importantly than on offense. So, you know, those young quarterbacks, those young offensive linemen, Purdue just has to get a good idea these next couple of weeks what they have and kind of act accordingly.
Okay, now I'm going to ask Stacy an impossible question, so get ready. The quarterback situation, you've seen Danny Etling, at least seen him. We've witnessed him and did what I consider to be an excellent job at the National Signing Day Conference. You've talked to Bilal Marshall and Austin Appleby last year. Just tell me about the personalities that you see, at least, and maybe you can speak more to Marshall and Appleby, I don't know, but just what do you see from those three guys and how they might, fit in? I know that this all falls under the anybody's guess category.
Right. I actually sat down with Danny Etling for about a half an hour last week because I'm writing a story on him for our recruiting issue, so was able to really sit down one-on-one with him a little bit too. And they seem like similar guys in terms of the intangibles, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, where they have that work ethic. At least they say they do. I mean, obviously we're not around to see it, but in speaking with them and speaking with guys who know them really well, like Appleby's quarterbacks coach and Cam Cameron when it relates to Etling, and they just seem like they get it and what it takes and what it's going to take even here to be able to be that guy who can be counted on. It's not just obvious. It's obviously about performance. But there's just so many important intangibles that go into playing that quarterback position that you need to be a guy that people respect and looked up to and listen to. And I think all of those guys carry that. And Rob Henry as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
keep forgetting about Rob.
He's the guy that, obviously has the most experience in terms of years and age of actually being in college and playing college games. And all of those guys, I think that is going to be, they're not going to have to worry about that from any of those guys. I think it's going to be really, you're going to base it on who plays the best and is the best physical tools, because all of those guys, I think, are just such good examples of what you need in a quarterback from all of those other things, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm really impressed with all of them. I mean, we had a kind of going back and forth conversation on the board, about Etling versus Appleby, and I'm like, don't assume that Etling's coming in here and starting right away. Don't forget about Austin Appleby, because he is all of those things that Etling is as well. So I mean, for me, if I had to pick a kind of front runner right now, I mean, Rob Henry, I think that they want to go in a direction of a more pro-style quarterback. That's what I think. And I'm not sure if Rob is there. I mean, you would hope he would be after all of this time, and we can only watch so much practice, obviously. But for me, Appleby maybe is the kid to go with, just because he's at that point in his development now where you could go ahead and hand him the reins and grow with him. But that's just me.
Yeah, it's going to be an incredibly significant story in the spring. The quarterbacks, obviously, once the story of the new coaching staff being in place kind of fades out of prominence ever so slightly. Obviously, the attention turns to 2013. The number one story around this 2013 team outside of the new coaching staff taking over is quarterback. I think when you've heard what John Shoop has had to say about the offense, what Darrell Hazell has had to say about the offense, Hazel's background, whether it be at Kent State or at Ohio State, I think you really have to keep a close watch on Austin Appleby in the spring. I think cognitively he's prepared more so than any young quarterback maybe Purdue's had in a long time. I think when you look systematically, as I just mentioned, at what these coaches do, John Shoop specifically says we want to be a physical running team and we want to throw play-action passes and have a high percentage throwing the ball up the field. Rob Henry, I love Rob Henry. He's might not be the best fit for that system. Also, there is value in Rob Henry also as a miscellaneous player, kind of as that Swiss Army knife on offense. He can have a major role on this team without taking a snap at quarterback. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Now, he wants to be a quarterback, but if he moves, it's easier to make that move now because you got a new coaching staff coming in. They can say, well, we have a different philosophy than the last staff that recruited you and told you could play quarterback. But I'd definitely keep an eye on Austin Appleby.
And just in speaking with Shoop this week, I asked him obviously about the Wildcat kind of formation and all those, and we had to post it on our site, but he had said the world I'd like to live in would be one where we have a quarterback and the quarterback isn't looking over his shoulder wondering if he's going to be in or out the next series. You go with the guy. But then he says, obviously, if you have people who you want to take advantage of all the guys you have. And he thinks that stimulates morale, is what he said, if you're able to really play to all those guys' strengths like we've been talking about. And so he's not closing the door on playing another quarterback. He just wants to have a quarterback. And it's a wrinkle instead of a system, which sounds smart.
Yeah. Well, something to keep in mind, too, with these quarterbacks, if Purdue goes with a young quarterback, it's the same deal as basketball right now with Ronnie Johnson playing point guard. It's an incredibly important position. You're going to make mistakes. You have to live with those mistakes. You have to play through them as a team. And if you're here, if a young quarterback's playing and struggling sometimes, the last thing you want, if this is the person you're committed to for the long term, the last thing you want is that player looking over their shoulder and that impacting their confidence, because once a quarterback's confidence goes south, everything goes south. So I think it's really important if Purdue goes with a young quarterback to commit absolutely to that player. Obviously, with the schedule coming up, there's going to be some hard times to play through, but that quarterback has to know he's the guy.
Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting decision to make because you don't have the beauty of having tons of information. I mean, you're going to have to make a decision with not having a ton of information in front of you. So in other words, they get to week 4 and somebody's really struggling, you know, you're going to have to make a call, and that's a tough position to be in, and not all that different to what you see in certain situations when there are coaching changes. Brian, the class of 2014, we're just starting in recruiting, and obviously, and I'll ask you both to speak about the personality of the assistant coaches and in this world of trying to recruit better talent to Purdue football. But first, maybe just address a little bit, and it's very early, I understand, just what some of Purdue's needs might be, but also, numbers potentially where they might be going with 2014.
In terms of needs?
Yeah, needs and maybe numbers.
I think you're looking at the line of scrimmage first and foremost. I think you're looking at the offensive line. Purdue signed 5 of them last year. They've got 5 redshirt freshmen that I know people in the program are pretty enthusiastic about. You only signed 1 this year because you didn't have to. Now you have to balance that out a little bit. You have to get a couple offensive linemen. And I still think you're looking at the defensive line. I still think defensive end maybe not be the deepest position. And then in terms of the younger ranks, that you look at defensive tackle, and you're going to be playing Brandon Taylor, Bruce Gaston, and if Ryan Isaac remains at defensive tackle, you're playing 3 seniors there. When you look at younger defensive tackles, barring any position switches, Ryan Watson, Michael Rouse in the program, that's really the 2 guys who jump out. You just signed Johnny Daniels too. So when you look at numbers, you're going to have to sign some interior defensive linemen also.
Stacy, you look at these guys, you can watch them from a personality standpoint. They are an impressive group. I mean, they seem to really come out. They seem to be A, friendly, B, pretty sincere, and they present themselves well. Your impressions?
Yeah, it was nice to be able to speak with Jafar, who was one of the younger guys on the staff, and you felt that energy. Not that the other guys don't have it, but I definitely felt that coming from him, and just the excitement of being able to have this challenge. And I think they're all really excited about the challenge to kind of see what they can do with Coach Hazell here. And and then there's the knowledge too. I mean, it seems like it's a really solid staff before we've even seen them coach anyone. But I think they're really interesting guys. I think that I really like the fact that they want to be hard on these players. I mean, from what it sounds like, what they're telling us, the standards are going to be very high. And so we'll find out very quickly who can handle it. And Kyle spoke with John Haycock the other day, and I loved the stuff that he said. I thought it was really interesting. An inch is an inch, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm going to make it really hard. It's like he scripts the practice for them to fail, because you want that to be the hardest things that you do or in practice. And then Saturday is easier. So I just love those kind of things. What they're saying all the right things. And if they carry that through actually in the practices, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch and to see what happens.
Ryan, we got about 60 seconds, but go ahead.
After the signing day press conference, I stuck around Mackey Arena, watched Hazel do that little radio show he did just because I was there. And I was watching up on the Jumbotron. And when he talked to Tim Newton about what they're going to do this winter in terms of finding out what they got in terms of discipline and culture, he looked like he got a little crazy look in his eye. And it just really seemed to me like they were going to put this team through HELL to see what they've got from a cultural standpoint, a work ethic standpoint. And the number one issue they've got to deal with right now is culture. This team's got to be more disciplined. It's got to be more organized. It's just got to be those things. Obviously, this season, a lot about this season, they might win 3-4 games, but if you've made some headway in terms of establishing what you want to establish with this program, that's the most important thing.
All right. Well said, and thank you both for your insights. It's going to be interesting. I think that's the thing. It is at least exciting from my perspective, is that it's going to be an interesting spring to see what we see. All right, next week, Dwayne Carlisle will join us, and it'll be good because Dwayne is obviously going to be putting this football team through some of its paces in the February workout, so we'll see how that's going with Dwayne. We'll also talk to Dwayne about his camp and some other things as well. Again, thanks to Brian and to Stacy and to Lydia and to Rob Hammerlick also for filling in for Gordon, who is on a nice tropical vacation this week. So good for Gordon. But thanks to all the folks at WLFI, and thanks again to our sponsors, Follett's, Purdue Game Day. Follett's Purdue Pride, a Purdue Game Day experience since 1945, and of course State Farm agent Trent Johnson at TrentIsMyAgent.com, and our good friends Christy Kuntz and the whole group at Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, State HDI tonight. So we'll see you next week, same time, 2 o'clock. We'll be back and we'll be talking about basketball, football, and obviously that visit with Dwayne Carlisle. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week on Gold and Black Live.